Imagine going to bed in a normal quiet town and waking up the next morning to find a massive crater in the middle of it, with no explosion, no warning at all, a perfectly formed hole where solid ground used to be. Today we're looking at real documented craters that appeared suddenly with no clear cause. Every one of these happened in the real world and left experts scratching their heads, so let's get into it. In the summer of 2014, helicopter crews flying over the Yamal Peninsula in northern Siberia spotted something that had never been there before. A massive circular crater about 260 feet wide and over 150 feet deep. It looked like a perfect hole punched straight down into the frozen earth. Everyone was stunned. Reindeer herders said the ground had been flat and solid just days earlier. There were no reports of earthquakes, no aircraft activity, no meteor sightings, no explosion sounds. It was just this giant crater in the middle of the tundra. And scientists rushed in and found something very strange. The surrounding soil showed signs of being pushed outward from below rather than blasted inward from above. There was no impact debris, no fragments of rock scattered around, no burn marks. What they eventually discovered was a buildup of pressurized methane gas trapped beneath the permafrost. As the Arctic warmed, the frozen ground weakened. Gas pressure increased until the surface failed catastrophically. Since then, more than a dozen similar craters have been discovered in the area. Many of them formed between satellite passes, which means they appeared suddenly and without warning. In 2013, residents in Sefner, Florida woke up to chaos. A massive hole had opened beneath a single-family home during the night. One bedroom was completely gone. The man sleeping inside vanished instantly. There was no earthquake, no storm, no construction activity. It was solid ground turning into a crater in seconds. When investigators examined the site, they found something disturbing. A sinkhole had opened directly into a vast underground cavern formed by limestone erosion. The collapse happened so quickly, the house had no time to shift or crack. It just dropped. What makes this case especially unsettling is that the ground-penetrating radar surveys done years earlier showed that there was no danger. The collapse happened without detectable warning signals. Florida has thousands of underground cavities formed by water-dissolving limestone. Most collapse slowly. This one clearly didn't. It failed catastrophically in the middle of the night. Even today, engineers admit that predicting these sudden collapses is extremely difficult. In some areas, the ground can appear stable for decades and then disappear in seconds. New fear unlocked. In 2010, residents of Guatemala City woke up to find a perfectly circular hole in the middle of an urban neighborhood. The crater was nearly 60 feet wide and plunged over 300 feet straight down. It looked unnatural, almost drilled. Cars and buildings nearby were untouched. One 3-story building collapsed directly into the hole, though. Initial rumors spread fast: meteor impact, secret tunneling, military testing. None of it actually matched the evidence, though. Geologists eventually determined the cause was a catastrophic failure of underground volcanic pumic layers, combined with decades of leaking sewage pipes. Water erosion hollowed out the ground until it collapsed vertically. City officials later claimed they had no way to detect the collapse in advance. The infrastructure had failed silently underground for years. In 2016, villagers of Guangxi Province, China, woke up to find a massive crater in the middle of farmland, over 160 feet wide, more than 200 feet deep. It formed overnight without noise loud enough to wake nearby residents. There were no storms, there was no mining activity. This area sits atop karst terrain where limestone dissolves easily. But what confused experts was the speed. Entire fields had vanished between dusk and dawn. When geologists examined the site, they found underground rivers had carved massive caverns beneath the surface. A sudden collapse caused the ground to drop vertically. Several similar craters appeared in nearby villages within months. In some cases, houses were evacuated just hours before collapse. Chinese authorities later admitted that hundreds of similar underground cavities exist beneath populated areas and that many are undetectable with standard surveys. Yikes. In 2019, farmers near the town of Schmalkalden, Germany, discovered a crater roughly 30 feet wide and 20 feet deep in the middle of a field. It had appeared seemingly overnight. There was no impact debris or anything like that, no signs of military ordnance, no seismic activity recorded. Police at first treated it as a possible unexploded bomb from World War II. Germany still finds them on a regular basis, but ground analysis ruled that out completely. Geologists determined it was a sudden subsidence event caused by gypsum dissolution underground. Water had eaten away the rock until the surface collapsed. What made this case unusual was the complete lack of cracking or deformation around the crater. The ground just dropped in a clean circular shape. Experts stated that similar collapses could occur across large parts of Central Europe with no no warning. In 2022, a massive crater appeared near a lithium mining operation in northern Chile, over 100 feet wide and rapidly expanding. Mining companies insisted there had been no blasting, there was no drilling, seismic sensors detected nothing. Crater formed near residential areas, prompting evacuations. Geologists concluded that underground water extraction had destabilized deep salt layers. The ground collapsed suddenly, creating a near-perfect sinkhole. What unsettled everyone was how fast it grew, too. Within days, the hole expanded by dozens of feet, despite no activity at the site. Officials admitted monitoring systems failed to detect the collapse before it happened. In 2017, motorists in Puebla, Mexico reported a sudden collapse beside a rural highway. By morning, a massive hole had opened less than 10 feet from the road. There were no tremors or construction. There was no weather event that had caused it. The crater measured over 60 feet across and continued expanding for weeks. Investigators found underground aquifers had been overdrawn for agriculture. As water levels dropped, the soil lost structural support. What made this case alarming was that traffic cameras showed the road intact hours before the collapse. There was just no warning this was going to happen. Engineers stated the collapse happened rapidly during the night. It was 2012 when residents near Bayou Corn, Louisiana, noticed trees tilting and bubbling gas rising from a nearby swamp. Days later, a massive sinkhole opened, swallowing trees and expanding relentlessly. The cause was eventually traced to a failed underground salt dome cavern used for industrial storage. The cavern collapsed, causing the surface to cave in. The sinkhole grew to over 30 acres, forcing permanent evacuation of nearby homes. And what shocked experts was how long the collapse continued. The ground kept falling for years after this initial event. In central Turkey, farmers discovered dozens of circular sinkholes appearing across agricultural land. Some appeared overnight. Researchers linked the phenomenon to aggressive groundwater pumping combined with gypsum dissolution. Underground voids expanded until collapse occurred suddenly. What made this case unique was the number. Entire regions experienced simultaneous crater formation. Officials warned that many more would appear with little to no notice. In September 2007, residents of the village of Caracas in southern Peru heard a sudden roaring sound from the sky, followed by a violent shock that rattled windows. Minutes later, they discovered a crater nearly 45 feet wide and over 15 feet deep, carved into the ground beside a dry stream bed. At first, it looked like a textbook meteor impact, but when scientists arrived, they were immediately confused. There was no burn pattern. There was no melted rock. Even stranger, villagers reported nausea, headaches, and a strong sulfur-like smell after the event. Some people ended up being hospitalized, and that led to rumors of toxic materials or military debris. Initial tests confirmed that a stony meteorite had struck the ground, but under normal conditions, a meteor of that size should have fragmented in the atmosphere. It should not have formed a crater that deep, and it should not have left the surrounding ground largely undisturbed. Further analysis revealed the meteorite was unusually dense and struck at a steep angle into water-saturated sediment. Instead of exploding or dispersing energy outward, it transferred force straight down, and that explained the crater, but not everything. Seismic sensors detected almost nothing. There was no fireball visible across large distances, and the ejecta was minimal compared to typical impacts. Even today, Caracas is studied as a rare type of impact event where expected signatures were largely absent. Scientists admit that if it had occurred in an unpopulated area, it might have been classified as a mysterious crater rather than an impact at all. With all that said, I've been your host, James. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.